Our first speaker will be Daryl Johnson, CEO of FranData. As CEO, Daryl has led the transformation of FranData from a data FDD database company to, as we are today, a world-class franchise-focused advisory firm. Known in the industry as the franchise economist, which he is. He's nationally recognized authority on franchising. He is a frequent speaker and author on franchising topics and trends. Daryl was instrumental in the creation of the only franchise underwriting scoring system. Daryl received a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in economics from Montana State University. He also earned an MBA from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Daryl. Our second speaker, as you can see the pictures, you're welcome. You're affectionately known around the office as Daryl. Our second speaker is Chuck Brand. Chuck is Chief of the Respondent Management and Promotion Branch. Now that branch is within the Economic Management Division, and it is, of course, with the U.S. Census Bureau. Chuck's office is responsible for providing guidance to respondents for the 5-year economic census and more frequently occurring economic surveys. Chuck holds a bachelor's degree in marketing from the University of Maryland and has a master's certificate in project management from George Washington University. Welcome, Chuck. And our third speaker is Carrie Kleinadens. Carrie began her career at the U.S. Census Bureau as a retail trade analyst for the economic census. And she has been, for the past 5 years, she's worked in the Respondent Outreach and Promotion Branch. She's been focusing on outreach for the 2017 economic census and other surveys, including the account management program. Carrie received a BS in statistics, she's more power to you, Carrie, with management and sociology minors from Purdue University, and has completed a master's certificate in project management from George Washington University. And we welcome you all. So Daryl, you're up. You ready?
I am indeed. Thank you, Sharon. And I am very pleased to be able to talk today to all of you franchisors about the information that the census has put together and how it can be used. And what we're going to do today is a couple things. And I'm very pleased to be on a panel with Chuck and Carrie. They have spent a good portion of their time in recent years in helping refine the franchise information that the census is collecting. As we know in this world of big data, this type of information has great value, but only if we can figure out ways of actually applying it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about ways that this information has been incorporated into use in the franchise community for the benefit of franchisors and helping them understand marketing strategy, prospecting, recruitment, site selection, and even unit performance comparisons. And I'm going to walk through 4 examples as a precursor to Chuck and Carrie explaining about what's coming next with regard to the census and how this information is going to be updated in the coming census. To get started, let me just give you a sense of background of where this has come from. Prior to 2008 census, we had no franchise-specific information. In 2008 and then again in 2012 and 2016, we've had progressive improvements built off of an initial foundation of franchise-specific census information in 2008. Part of the importance of communicating this to you today is to let you know from the census experts that we have on this panel today where it's going next and what additional things are coming into it, the timing of it, and so forth. But before we get there, let's look at what the value is of this type of information. We know that we've got demographics experts out there that have access to all sorts of household information and business information, and there's lots of data floating around out there. But let's look specifically at what some things that are evolving from census data to be able to supplement that data with additional information to lead to better decision making specifically for franchisors. And for that, what we have done from our own, from FranData's own experience in working with census data and in enhancing some of that data with additional information, we're going to focus on, and I'll walk through fairly quickly, 4 case studies of how this applies, starting with a daycare in Denver around local area marketing. Talk about a lawn care brand that is seeking to find new franchises, particularly veterans in the Nashville area. A QSR that has been operating in Ohio but is now specifically looking to find a location in the Cleveland area where they haven't been before. And finally, and perhaps most intriguing, at least from my perspective, being able to look at 2 units in adjacent cities in Texas, and those units and the area that they're in have almost identical sets of characteristics. The units are almost identically performing, yet one with the ability of looking at census data in more detail is revealing that it is significantly outperforming the other based on where it's located. So those are the 4 examples that we're going to go through, and I will go through them fairly quickly because we do want Chuck and Carrie to give you a good foundation of what's coming next. To start with the first case study on the local area marketing, here's the example. It's a daycare franchise, and it's been in that location for a while, but it looks like things are shifting, and it's losing a declining revenue base. Question is, what do they do about it? And part of the answer lies in who are they marketing to and what has shifted and how do they assess what's shifted. In order to make those determinations, we're going to look at specifically the American Community Survey information from the census and how that, in the first instance, can look at children in that area by zip codes. So being able to assess what has changed between 2012 and 2016 is the first step in understanding what that local area marketing shift may be and helping that franchisee set a new marketing program. First of all, looking at the population data, looking at that trend information, but then going deeper. One of the other revealing aspects coming out of that census information is an understanding of what the interests are of the households in that part of the Denver area. And by drilling down into that, one of the things that became more obvious is that in that particular suburb area, increasingly people were using their free time in outdoor activities. Coupled that with the shifting dynamics of that area moving slightly more towards Asian-speaking homes, draws a very clear conclusion that actually resulted in a reversal of that declining revenue and a return to increasing revenue by shifting material to daycare activities, more after-school care activities and outdoor play, and also targeting some specific marketing materials to that growing Asian community. All of that information came directly from census data and using the tools that the Census Bureau has made available to be able to understand that in a greater detail. Second case study, let's look at recruitment. Finding franchisees in the Nashville area, a lawn care company, they particularly wanted to look at veterans in that area. Would also like to understand from a preparation for business standpoint what the education levels of those people are, and some idea of from a salary range standpoint what they're competing against. If using basic census data information, this is the 2016 American Community Survey information, the concentration of veterans as a percent of the total population in Nashville created a targeted area that says in the upper northwest part of the metropolitan area would be the place to start looking for veterans, and that would be a better place to establish a marketing recruitment program. However, looking at more information and digging down more deeply into the census information that is now available, the total concentration of veterans suggests a very different targeting point, and that is more in the southern part of the metropolitan area. That, coupled with the education levels of the veterans who have moved outside their service to the country and where they have set up homes and concentrated in populations leads to a higher concentration in that lower area of college-educated veterans. And finally, looking at where the employers are and the type of employment that those employers have leads to a very clear understanding of what kind of recruitment program should be put in place to attract those veterans in the Nashville area. All of this information is built off of the American Community Survey information provided by the census. Third case study. Whoops, we're still on the second one. The additional component of this in layering some outside information in further research shows that for instance, the strategic partners through Operation Stand Down created a very strong community feel around the charitable work that existed in that particular area of Nashville, and knowing that helped to build a much more robust marketing program specifically for that targeted group of franchisees. And I need to back up just a moment and see where I was. Finally, or the third case study, the example of site location. Most of you have very refined site location programs. What you can find from this, though, is you don't have to go to a very elaborate demographics company for site location work with the tools that the Census Bureau has compiled and put together for specifically for franchise uses. So let's look at this case study. This is a brand QSR that was trying to target activities, a location program in Cleveland. They had not been in that area before. Looking at the American Community Service data in zip codes showing where higher incomes and job growth are that align more with what their particular customer profile was. Combining that with the type of worker led to a further refinement when they were trying to target management and professionals specifically, and understanding in each of those zip codes where that concentration of particular customer profiles existed. And going beyond that and saying beyond the employment information, also being able to narrow it down within that broader community of locations into some very specific ones where the demographics get even tighter, aligned with what the ideal profile for that QSR are. And finally, that overlaid with a number of employers where the activity is in terms of the frequency of eating lunch out, led to a conclusion that moving out of the downtown area where it looked like there was a higher concentration of people initially to the suburbs where there is more lunch activity going on for that customer profile. All of this information drawn from census information, and finally overlaying that, in our case with our franchisee database, looking at where the competitive locations are, provides a very tight pattern of understanding of both the ideal zip codes to be targeting in and where other locations are, franchised locations, from a competitive standpoint. Finally, I'll go to a better way of assessing unit performance within a system. And this one is looking at, in this case, a fast food performance in Texas. Dallas and Austin, two very similar sets of demographic communities. And in this case, we almost have identical operating units in those two cities. In trying to compare these two units, which were two of the highest performing units in this system, and normally one would conclude within the system if they're all, these two are the highest performing, they both should be equally rewarded and encouraged and held out as the top examples for the system as a whole. And while that may be true, there's a way with census data to actually differentiate in more detail and reveal which one is actually the better performer. If you look at the numbers that are on the screen in front of you, it almost looks identical. They're just almost mirror images of one another. While the Dallas location, though, has slightly lower sales than Austin, the conclusion is it actually is outperforming it relative to the market it's in. The store sales versus the region and national sales of this brand, and in terms of what the local area from census data suggests is maximizing the return that that particular unit should be able to achieve in that market, suggests that one actually is doing a better job of performing relative to the other. And then overlaid with that, if you broaden that to a focus on just the employee efficiency in those two, and comparing the Dallas location with the Austin location, Dallas is also doing a better job of maximizing the performance of its employees relative to the sales that it's getting. And finally, even on the payroll level, the census information allows even further drilling down to get to a comparative amount per employee that's being expended in those two units, and that leads to an efficiency determination, keeping in mind that at the top level, these two units were almost identical in the total sales that they were generating. But one on 3 different levels is actually performing better. Finally, with an overlay of additional data beyond just census data, in this case with franchisee data that we have across other comparative brands, one can get a very clear picture of not just the comparative operations on 2 units, but geographically how these units on a nationwide basis are able to compete on a comparative basis throughout the country. The conclusion on this that we would have, at least on the unit level, is that while you look at within your system and you look at your highest performers and you say, well, maybe 2 of them or 3 of them are operating on a very, very similar basis, and therefore they're actually all equal, with modern census information and overlay that with additional information that's available on franchises today, you can actually get a much cleaner picture and a much more efficient picture of how these units are actually performing relative to one another. And that feedback to the franchisees is something that is much more significant in today's world because of the operating efficiencies that we're all trying to achieve in each of the systems. Which leads me then to the first poll question. Those 4 examples that I used, which one would you deem today to be the most relevant in as it relates to the business that you're in? Are you finding that it is more impactful on the marketing side from local area marketing to be able to expand on that? Recruitment, site selection? Please respond by typing your responses in, and I'll leave this open for a moment. They're now starting to come in pretty quickly. All right. I'll leave it open for about another 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close now, and let's see what we've got. For you listeners today, it's a pretty clear distinction that recruitment and local area marketing are significantly higher in interest, and I think there's a message. Hopefully, Chuck and Carrie, as you pick up on the back end of this in terms of the census for the next round that we're going to do, there's hopefully some guidance to you on where franchisors are viewing the importance of the information and how they're applying it. And now we'll turn it over, Chuck, to you to talk about the both where we are today with the census information and what's coming in the new census and the timing of it.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, FranData. It's my pleasure to be here today. Welcome, attendees. Before we speak about the 5-year economic census, which will be mailed shortly, I'd like to give some context to the economic census in terms of all the other surveys that we do that we send to businesses, all these Census Bureau economic surveys. They're a key source of information and official statistics that companies can use. We have quarterly and monthly surveys that are small in sample and provide the most timely data available. For instance, we have, whenever you hear on the news about retail sales that went up or down in a particular month by a certain percentage, that all comes from the U.S. Census Bureau from our monthly retail trade survey. The monthly indicators move the markets, and so these are critically important surveys that we conduct. Typically they are attributed to the Department of Commerce, but they are conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau. We conduct annual surveys that have larger samples and provide the most up-to-date trend data available. The samples are, we mail to tens of thousands of recipients, and we collect data and publish it on an annual basis. The data are more detailed by geography and by industry for the annual surveys. And every 5 years, we conduct the economic census, which measures all businesses and provides the most comprehensive data available. This is the basis for all the other surveys we do. The other surveys benchmark to the 5-year economic census. So these surveys set the standard for U.S. economic statistics and are fueled by the data provided by individual businesses. Here's James. He's a great example of the use of economic statistics and the value of responding to our economic surveys. When it was time for James to open his second restaurant, he used U.S. Census Bureau economic statistics to help pick the location, free and available online. With industry trends and zip code level data, he identified a downtown spot with a high potential for growth. James used data from the economic census to help that site selection. Now, I want to say a few words about a really critical tool that we have at the Census Bureau called Census Business Builder. It is a suite of services that provide selected demographic and economic data from the Census Bureau tailored to specific types of users in a very simple to access and use format. It's really our first effort in trying to combine economic data that we collect from businesses with demographic data that we collect from households. We have a regional analyst edition, which is built for those who require a broad portrait of people and businesses in their particular areas, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, a regional planning staff, or anyone who wants a geographic profile, a profile of their geographic area. It presents data for all sectors of the economy and for a user-defined region that make up more than one area. We also have a small business edition, which is built primarily for small business owners who need key data for their business plan or to better understand their potential market. It presents data in a single type of business and geography at a time. Now, we have key features that are unique to the Census Business Builder and make it so easy to use. We have menus and search tools to select location that you'd like to research and nearly all types of businesses, and you can see this map-based tool. The interactive maps that you can browse and download data about selected areas and types of businesses. A customizable dashboard that includes a time series and geographic comparison chart. We have an interactive and downloadable reports as a result of the input that the user provides. And now it's optimized for your smartphone or tablet. So say you are interested in site selection and you're driving around town and you land at a particular place and you want to find out more about that area in terms of census data from demographic and economic statistics. You can the optimization on a smartphone allows you to do that right on site. So we think that's a really great tool that really is coming into its own, and it provides easy access to data that previously wasn't so easily accessible. We have other data products we use, infographics to demonstrate the value of our data. You can see here U.S. breweries that were on the rise from 2007 to 2012, data visualizations, and time series analysis. Another thing I want to mention, and this is timely because it just was released today, at census.gov you can find a new blog written by our colleague Andy Haight entitled Franchising in America, Not Just Fast Food Restaurants. If you go to census.gov and scroll down under America Counts, you can find that blog. There's a lot of great information there, and it even includes a table that references some of the franchise data that we collect, estimated number of franchise establishments. We do that in the economic census. So I highly encourage everybody to go out there and take a look at census.gov. Now I'd like to turn it over to Carrie for more about the economic census.
Hi, thank you. So as Chuck briefly mentioned, we do have a wide variety of surveys, but I want to focus with you about this year's upcoming economic census. So as we know, the Census Bureau measures the nation's population every 10 years, but it also measures U.S. businesses every 5 years. And that survey is the economic census. The next economic census will be conducted in the second quarter of 2018. So we are going to actually mail out on May 1st. And we'll be asking companies to report their 2017 year-end numbers. So while we are talking about the value and importance of the survey, it is required by law. So that is also something to keep in mind if you do receive one. But we also, the thing is that when we talk about the survey, we also like people to know the value of the data that comes from it, not just that it is required. And we take your confidentiality and personal business information very seriously here at the Census Bureau. All of your responses are kept confidential. Company data is only used in an aggregate form, and it can only be used for statistical purposes. And we are required by law to keep your information private and secure. As employees of the Census Bureau, we are actually sworn for life to not mention the companies that we interact with or the data. Response this time is required online. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this in a moment, but it is going to be fully online. There will be no paper forms. And this is to reduce the time needed for completion. It improves accuracy and provides cost savings to taxpayers. And then as we've mentioned before, all these results from the economic census are free and available online to guide business decisions and policy making. I also wanted to talk to you about the information that is required. The economic census asks for information not just at a company level, but it actually asks for each location of a business. So we are going to ask about the employer identification number that's affiliated with a location, as well as the physical address. And the physical address is important is because, when, as we mentioned, we have all these detailed geography statistics. We need to know where that business is located so we can match it with the appropriate geography to publish that statistics for that region. We also ask for the primary business activity. So we're wanting to know, are you a movie theater? Are you a car wash? Are you a tech firm? We need to know so that we can classify you according to your industry code. And we ask for sales receipts or revenue and employment and payroll. And then we do get more specific industry questions, and this is where franchise comes into play. So as Daryl mentioned, that we have in the last 10 years or so had a franchise-specific question. And that question is, it's pretty straightforward. I'm sure if you are a franchisor, it asks, did this location operate under a trademark or brand name authorized by a franchisor? And the answers are yes, it is franchise or owned. Yes, it is a franchisee owned, or no. And then we also ask the business to provide the name of the trademark so that we can make sure that things are matched correctly on our end. And then along with industry-specific questions, we do ask for a detailed split of your sales or revenue. And the reason why this is industry-specific is because we know that not all businesses are the same, and so we only want to ask you the questions that are relevant to you. So for example, a gas station, well, of course, we would ask them about gas sales or receipts, maybe convenience store sales or receipts. We could also ask about a car wash. But of course, that would not be applicable to a different kind of business, maybe like your local restaurant. You're probably not going to have a car wash attached to your restaurant. And then speaking of restaurants and detailed industry questions, for various industries we ask more detailed questions that are just specifically for them. So with restaurants, this is always my example. We ask for primary food types. So we want to know if you're a Chinese restaurant, if you're a sub place, if you're a deli. We also ask you to estimate your time of day sales. So how much of your sales is from in the breakfast window versus the lunch window versus an evening. And that way we can publish statistics on a state level so that people can get a feel for how the restaurants in their region operate. And one example we have from this, I know that Daryl covered a number of case studies, but this is a example that my colleague mentioned. He was speaking in New Mexico, and he was talking to a local restaurant owner who wanted to expand his business to include a drive-through window. And he was able to use our census data online to see that in New Mexico particularly, restaurants with a drive-through window made more money. So he was able to take this information to his local bank, where he was able to secure a loan for that expansion of his business. And then it was a success in adding that. He said he was actually able to even pay off the loan early because he had such an increase in business by adding that drive-through. So I know that it seems cumbersome to have all these different categories of questions for your locations, but there is a purpose and a use for even you as franchisors to use this information afterwards as well. And I also said that I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about how response is going to look for the 2017 Econ Census. As I mentioned, the program is going to launch in May, so our official letters are going to be mailed out May 1st. And I say letters because since it is all online, we are just going to send you a letter with our web address and then a unique company code to access the survey. And the deadline for this survey is June 12th of 2018. And the other thing that's new about how we're doing it this time is we are switching for a lot of our economic surveys to set up an online account. So you will be able to use your own email as your username, and you'll create your own password and security questions, and that will allow you to access the survey. It will also, you will also in this portal be able to communicate with various staff for help. So you could, ask for, you could send us an email, ask for a time extension if that was needed, and even access if you are responding to multiple Census Bureau economic surveys. They will eventually all be rolled into this portal for you to just use your one username and password to remember. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we also have a new online, well, it is online, we actually have a new reporting tool. So while people have been able to respond online in the past, we have asked them to download a software to do that, but that is no longer the case. We now have a new web-based application that makes it easier for businesses with multiple locations and various staff working on the survey to collaborate and work together online. And here I just wanted to highlight, this is kind of our key message that we wanted to get across today, that it's data from the nation's businesses plus stats on every industry and geography equals one valuable resource for your business.
All right. Well,
and then
well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to put up this poll. So we've kind of talked a little bit more of a high level about some of the resources that are available to you. And so our poll would be if you would be interested in learning more details on these free resources that we had discussed. So the options are yes, more of a how-to webinar, or yes, that you'd be interested in links, or no, today was enough information for you.
All right, well, we'll leave this open for a moment. While we're leaving this open, let me ask a question on the timing of the release of the census information that's being conducted this year. When will it first be available?
Daryl, the first data release from the economic census will be in September 2019.
All right, and when you say the first release, is there going to be a phased-in set of releases, or will this just be the official release and it'll be available in its full form at that point?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's really just the first look at the data that we provide, and then we'll continue to flow out data as we analyze it and prepare it for publication. A big part of that analysis is the critical work that goes into ensuring that there's no disclosure for any individual businesses, which speaks to the level of detail that we have by industry and by geography. The more detail you get, the more analysis has to be applied to ensure that we don't divulge any individual information. It just takes a lot of time since we mail to so many recipients and we have so much data to analyze. But to answer the question, that's just the beginning. And actually the last data release will be in late 2021. Okay.
So we'll have a rolling set of releases that we should anticipate from the most recent, or for the survey that's going to be done later this year.
Yes, yes. And I'd like to remind all the attendees that for more timely information, we do have those surveys that we do on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis to complement the level of detail that we provide with the economic census.
Okay. There was also a question, and we're going to move into the questions now. I'm going to leave this up for a moment because I'll come back and address this. But as we're looking at this, the other question that came up that I see somebody had sent in is, how do you find census information for your particular location and business type? Is that something that's easy for you to answer here, or should that be part of what this survey result suggests that we should be sending links for additional resources, which we will, of course, do. We'll provide those links that will connect them to the various tools that the Census Bureau now has that will help them. But in specific to the question of how do I find information about my particular location and my business type, is that something you can address now?
Sure. In terms of particular location, we won't divulge any information about particular businesses or locations. If you want data about your business type, then it's available at census.gov. If you go to census.gov and then click on data, then you can find data tools and apps. You can find a site that's a link entitled Data Main, where you can access the American Fact Finder to find all the data that are available from our economic surveys. I also encourage everyone to use that Census Business Builder. While we don't have every economic program in it, we do have those that have been used most frequently, and gives everybody a good opportunity for quick and easy access and an interesting way to look at that data when combined with demographic data. So it's either the Census Business Builder or go to census.gov and find American Fact Finder. But we'd be more than happy to provide all that in content that we pass along.
All right, and I think for the benefit of those who are listening in on this today, we'll follow up with information with links to the connections that you're suggesting and the additional information, plus a copy of the presentation itself. So we'll send along this information to the participants today and help them to better understand not only the benefits of how this information can be applied, but how to actually get at this information. And with that, I will also reinforce now the importance of encouraging both at the franchisor level and encouraging your franchisees to respond to the survey this year. It's not so much that we would love to be able to say that you have to pay to participate, in that, because then you have a vested interest in getting this information. You don't, but it's required by law. We want to encourage all franchisees to participate in it for the benefit of everyone. But this foundation of information, when it's overlaid with all the other kinds of big data information that is available for third parties, and we routinely use that additional information every day, but it's got to be built on a solid foundation, and that's where the census information comes in. So we want to encourage all of our listeners today and to encourage them to talk to other franchisors to participate in the survey. Chuck, Carrie, I know that you've repeatedly said that any questions that come up, you guys are more than happy to handle, and that you have a set of tools to guide people in the completion of the surveys as well. So with that, I am going to bring to a close today. I'm going to check one last time to see, has the economic survey been done before this year's? There's one last question. So the question is, has the economic survey been done before this year? And I had mentioned that earlier, but Chuck, I'll turn to you to explain what specifically was done and maybe a little bit what changed from each of the last three versions of the survey.
Certainly, yeah. The economic census we have done every 5 years since, I would say the 50s, and then before that, I believe we did it every 4 years. We've been collecting economic data since the 1800s altogether. What's changed this year is the fact that we're going all electronic, that we have modified some of the industries that we collect and publish by to keep up with changing economic times. So we try to keep up. We try to keep up with the latest trends. And for instance, there's more emphasis on e-commerce than before, and specific types of industries that were primarily brick and mortar really aren't anymore. Have more or less fallen by the wayside.
All right, and I might add, I think specific to the question on the economic side of it was related to franchising, and while you have census data that went back to the 1800s, and I think there, at least from a historical perspective, some would argue that Ben Franklin was one of the creators of the franchise business model. You don't have franchise information going back quite that far.
Yes, sir.
To kind of bring that a little more current, I believe in 2008 is when the first franchise-specific set of questions was asked as part of the business survey. Am I right?
That is absolutely right.
Okay.
We asked it in 2008 for the year for the data, the reference period covering 2007.
Yes. So we have that period, then again in 2012 and 2016, and I believe were the three interval periods, and now we're putting in the 2018 data collection for release starting in late 2019 and beyond. So that, in answer to the person's question about what economic information, I think that question was related to how much franchise-specific information is available. That's kind of the current history of it.
Understood.
Okay, with that, I will bring this to a close. We appreciate the time that our Census Bureau colleagues have provided to us today to be able to help expand upon some of the topics that we typically talk about in our FranData webinars. But in this case, I think the importance of it is such that we want to encourage not only participation in it, but we want to encourage greater use of this information in the franchise community. So Chuck, Carrie, thank you very much for participating, and thank you all for listening in today to this webinar.